Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Sovereign Shift. I'm your host, Chelsea Eden Dubois, and I am so excited to bring you the conversation that I have recently had with the incomparable Mel Dorman. Okay. So, Mel is a former social worker turned real estate entrepreneur, a broker, a speaker, TEDx speaker, an advocate for building wealth with purpose. From teaching English to orphans of HIV/AIDS in Uganda to helping women escape sex trafficking in India, Mel has always been driven by a commitment to social impact. After earning her master's in social work from UCLA, she worked in jails, psych wards, and homeless shelters, providing support to those on the margins. I don't know where to even begin. I'm just find myself so fortunate that I was able to find Mel on Instagram and I reached out to her immediately because I knew that she was just absolutely someone I had to have a conversation with. She is just a wellspring of knowledge and wisdom about wealth, building wealth, getting money in the hands of everyday people and really transferring wealth from billionaires to the regular folks, you and your neighbor, your family, etc. And this is information that's just so needed. For me personally, I absolutely grew up financially illiterate, sadly. And it's really taken a toll on my adult years. And it's something that has taken me time to crawl out of that hole, to rebuild and honestly reprogram a shit ton of limiting beliefs around money and wealth management, and just finding the courage to make decisions that where you're taking a chance on you. And so her story is just absolutely phenomenal and so inspiring, and I just know that it's going to totally change your perception about real estate here. So get ready for that. Before we begin, though, I'll just invite you, as always, to just drop in to yourself, take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And take another deep breath in through the nose and through the mouth. And we'll take one more deep breath in and through the mouth. And just as you drop in, as you take time to listen to this episode and hear what Mel has to say, I would just invite you to examine your own relationship with money, with wealth, with personal sovereignty, and what it could mean for you if you take the road less traveled. Here's to your sovereignty. Welcome to The Sovereign Shift, the podcast for women ready to reclaim their voice, their nervous system, and their power in a world that demands they stay small. I'm Chelsea Eden Dubois, founder of The Sovereign Shift, creator of Woo Breathwork, and your guide on this breath-led journey into sovereignty of self, system, and spirit. Each episode, I sit down with powerful women, thought leaders, everyday revolutionaries, and allied voices to explore the real, raw, and radical path to embodied sovereignty. We talk about stress, burnout, addiction, motherhood, balance, sexuality, leadership, and breath-led spiritual awakening. And yes, we go deep into all things woo, the divine feminine, altered states of consciousness, intuition, ritual, and the parts of womanhood that have been exiled or dismissed as too much by patriarchal systems. Here, truth is medicine, breath is power, and your sovereignty, non-negotiable. Let's begin. Okay. Mel, thank you so much for agreeing to come and speak with me, a total internet stranger who reached out to you. I slid into your DM on Instagram. It's the whole reason why me with only 150 followers am verified, so that I don't look like some kind of weirdo scammer coming out of the woodwork when I find people like yourself whose message is just so incredible that I have to talk to them. I have to pick their brain. I want other people
Yeah.
to hear what you have to say, and I honestly think that yours is a message that women need right now more than ever, no matter
Yeah.
which side of the border you live on, no matter where you are in the world. So, welcome,
Yeah.
welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's such an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's just sort of dive in. So one of the things that I just really truly loved from the get-go was okay, fuck the patriarchy. We've got to get money into the hands of women and get real estate back in communities. And we really just sort of need to change the trajectory of the economy right now. So
Mhm.
can you tell me a little bit about how you got here?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a very non-traditional path to building wealth. I actually, when I graduated from college, it was 2009. It was like the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I hated capitalism. I was a sociology major. I wanted to work with people on the margins. And I had worked internationally and doing development work. And really, what changed my mind about money was when I was working in a slum in Kolkata, India, and I got to see a social impact business, which is where they're not only trying to make a profit, but they're actually trying to change a social situation. And so at this nonprofit, they were helping women out of sex trafficking. You can just imagine a neighborhood that had over 10,000 women who had been forcibly trafficked. And what we did is we provided an alternative work for them. So they were able to make handbags and t-shirts that we sold all over the world. And that was really the first moment that I saw money as something that could be used as a positive tool. And I needed it because right when I got back from India, I found out that my dad had Alzheimer's and he's 67 years old and he was the breadwinner of our family. So I went from helping people, in the slums of Kolkata who were really disadvantaged to coming back home realizing that I was actually in a position where I wasn't financially literate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Mm.
that's a big realization kind of thing when you run up against the realities of capitalism and how it can impact us. So, where did you go from there?
Yeah, so once I found out that my dad had Alzheimer's, the doctors told us it was going to cost $7,000 a month for his care. And we thought, okay, well, maybe Medicare will cover it. No, they don't help with Alzheimer's. And also, we thought maybe Social Security would do it. But even though my dad was a roofer for 50 years, he was only going to get about $2,000 a month in Social Security. So my family was in a crisis. We needed to figure out really quickly how to take care of him. So I started studying real estate in all of my downtime at work while I was a social worker working at LA County Jail, actually. So
No
you
way.
could just imagine, I'm processing inmates, meeting with them, doing mental health treatment, and in between that, I've got my little books open and I'm studying real estate, trying to understand how I could possibly help my own family. And that really got me started. I learned everything I could in that year, and I saved up about $50,000 working overtime at my job over the course of a few years. And I was stoked. I was like, okay, I'm going to jump into this real estate stuff. And I ended up finding this woman who was selling a duplex for her parents. She was an out of state realtor. And I'll never forget when the appraisal came back, it was $50,000 more than I was paying for it. And that's when the light bulb went on, like $50,000, that's what a social worker makes in a year. And I was going to make that just by sending out some direct mail and meeting my neighbors and negotiating directly with them. And the seller was stoked. She was making about 150,000. She'd only owned it for about 3 years. So we were both winning quite a bit. And it was a testament to what real estate could do. But unfortunately, right after I closed on that first property, my dad took a turn for the worst, and my sister called me and said that I needed to come home and say goodbye. So that was really the pinnacle moment, the sort of fork in the road where I decided, okay, I don't want to do this clocking in thing for anybody else anymore. I want to work just for myself and I want to be all in on this real estate investing stuff. So I did that. I quit my job with $16,000 in my checking account, brand new duplex mortgage, and I was all in really because of seller financing.
I do want to talk about what happens to us when we finally make a decision to go all in like on ourselves because so many
Mhm.
things can open up for us. But I would like can you explain what seller financing is for people listening like myself who
Yeah.
don't actually know what that is? I've never heard of it before I
Yeah.
saw you, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Most people have never heard of it, and it's interesting because it's how we used to buy and sell homes before the banks got involved in the 1930s. And so it's quite simple. It's when the seller owns the property and you can just pay them in installment payments over time. So instead of sending your mortgage payment to Chase Bank or Wall Street, you're actually just sending it to your neighbor down the street. And that means that you can come up with all the rules and terms. So there's no gatekeeping.
Mm.
There's no having to get your debt to income ratio right, or having a W-2 job, or having a perfect credit score, or really any of the things that banks require of us to be able to buy our own home. It's really just a negotiation between you and another person. And what's so beautiful about it is it's a huge win for the seller because they get to make hundreds of thousands of dollars that we would ordinarily be giving to the bank in interest. And so it really redirects that wealth away from Wall Street back into our communities.
Holy smokes. That's amazing. And so when you made that decision to frankly do something quite terrifying, right? Like
Yeah.
one, you left your job. Number two, you're going all in on something that like maybe it's beginner's luck, maybe it's
Uh,
a fluke. Like what was going through your mind when you made that great leap?
yeah, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I mean, I was emboldened watching my dad do that, and I didn't
Right.
want my fate to be his, so or his fate to be mine, I should say. And so, yeah, I really was all in. I just learned about seller financing, which to me meant that I didn't have to have a job, I didn't have to have any money, I just needed to build relationships. So I felt completely emboldened to just jump all in. And so I started sending mail to strangers, I started cold calling, I went to this boot camp and learned all about it, and eventually I ended up calling this guy named Kelly, who was he was a retired or retiring bankruptcy attorney, and we hit it off over the phone, and so, a few months into the friendship, he actually asked me if I could give him an evaluation on his triplex and let him know how much it cost. Now at this point, I was only a realtor for, like, 5 minutes, so I didn't really know much at all. I got my license, to try to fill in the gaps while I was building my portfolio, and I ended up meeting him at the property, and before I could even say anything to him, he said to me, "I'd like to seller finance this to somebody." And so I knew right then and there this was gonna be my first seller finance deal, and, we can get into the details, but I ended up just buying it from him with $500 out of pocket. And so that's how accessible seller financing really is when you search for these types of people in your community.
Holy smokes. It is so hard to imagine how this works. Like, as someone that's only ever dealt with like big banks and
Yeah.
stuff, it's like, it's kind of blowing my mind, right?
Yeah.
Because how does it actually, how does it
How does
work?
it work? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is a great question. I love this question. So it's really quite simple. It's two pieces of paper. One of them is a promissory note. So imagine an IOU. It's going to say, I owe you this much money, this much interest rate over this period of time. And then the other document, so you got a promissory note, and then you have what's called a deed of trust. And I love that. It's a promise with a trust. How
Mhm.
relational and beautiful is that? And basically, the deed of trust connects that promissory note to a real piece of property, which means that you can't just run off and not pay them
Right.
back. They'll always be able to sell the property, which is why the seller is so secure and why they can feel good and confident about moving
Mm,
forward because
okay.
they always have that security that if you don't pay, they'll just get the property back. And in Oregon, that's only $15,000 to foreclose. So essentially, as long as you give the seller $15,000 in a down payment, they can use your own money to foreclose on you if you didn't pay them. So it's a very secure investment for them, and they get to make hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest if they take that risk.
Okay, yeah, because that was my next question. Like, what are some of the benefits to the seller? Because, like,
Mhm.
thinking about it from, again, it's hard because you think your default is to go to the sort of capitalist
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like, well, where's
Yeah.
my big chunk of money? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we very much we're conditioned to be consumers, not creators. We're
Yeah.
conditioned to be in this passive role and to let corporations and big banks do all the heavy lifting and leave it to the professionals. But in doing that, we actually give away all the profit too. And
Mm,
so what I'm advocating is that people take that personal agency and build these social connections and they'll get all that profit that comes with it. And so yeah, I don't I don't know if that answers your question, but, like, I see it as this, rebuilding of the social fabric that our communities have really lost over time. If you look at America, we have this huge growing wealth disparity. CEOs are making, like, 632 times what their employees are making, it's like, if you ask any 2 Americans, one will tell you that they do not have $500 in case of an emergency came up. So, like, we are a nation that has a lot of wealth, but not in our actual population. It's really stratified in these, billionaire class. And so, what I'm trying to teach people is to redirect that, to start to recognize that giving your money to a financial institution only strengthens the billionaire class. But if
mm,
we start to work together on this one-on-one, peer-to-peer lending, we take our power back. We take the community back. And collectively, we're sending about $400 billion a year to Wall Street. When that all that money could just go right back into our communities, and you can imagine the impact that would have on individual households, helping people retire, especially boomers. So many of them are equity rich and cash flow poor. They don't know how to get out of their big home. They don't know how to downsize because interest rates are so high and housing's so expensive. And so this becomes a way to convert their equity into an income stream so that they can downsize into maybe a condo or, retirement community or with friends and family, and they can continue to live off their own equity.
Oh my god, the light bulb just went off in my head because I was like, "Of course, this is for boomer," like, obviously, this is yeah, boomers are in the place to do that, right? Because, yeah,
Mhm.
they're equity rich. Yeah, okay. Wow. Oh,
Uh,
the light bulbs are going off.
yeah.
Like,
Well,
once you see it.
yeah. Well, and you're asking, like, what are more of the benefits? So,
Oh,
obviously, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they'll make doing this.
no
There's a
kidding.
risk, right? There's a risk of $15,000. That would be awful. They could lose that. But the upside is hundreds of thousands of dollars. The other big, thing is it's a secure investment, right? This isn't the stock market. It doesn't go up and down like that. It's like if you if you need to sell because somebody's not paying you, you have an asset to do that. And if it's appreciated over time, the seller gets that equity too. So there's a lot of reason for the borrower to follow through. And I think one of the biggest advantages for sellers is it delays their capital gains. So,
Mm,
capital gains tax can be upwards to like 35% when you calculate, state and federal taxes. So if you're selling $1 million building and you've owned it for 27 and a half years, that means that that seller, that person who has a rental property, they've completely depreciated it. And what I mean by that is they've written off the property over those years. And now when they sell it, they have to pay taxes on the full thing, the whole profit of it. So that means they're paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. But if they do it seller financed and they do an interest only payment, it means they're not paying those taxes. They're deferring them. And instead of paying them, they're making interest on those pre tax dollars. I know that was a lot, but
it's very much like when you see it, you can't unsee it. And like,
yeah,
I consider myself to be a woman of reasonable intelligence, but for some
yeah,
reason, finances have always felt so out
yeah,
of reach,
totally.
so out of reach. And I
Yeah.
cannot be the only one.
No, we're not taught financial literacy in school. We're not supposed to get it because they want us to be workers and employees, right? And so we don't have access to this. And then furthermore, the access that we have is usually written to the male persona through this
Mhm.
like win-lose patriarchal mindset, when really abundance mindset is that there's a win-win. That we can actually build strategic partnerships that are like mutual aid, that you don't have to get one over on somebody or gentrify the
Mhm.
neighborhood or whatever. You can actually just invest in somebody else's future who is in your community, helping them retire. And in the process, they're investing in you by allowing you to get into home ownership or to build a portfolio.
Wow. That is just absolutely incredible. And I'm curious to know, like, how many properties are in your portfolio now?
So, over the course of those 5 years after I quit my job as a social worker, I had bought 34 rental units. And last year I consolidated. So that means I sold a bunch and just kept, my equity and fewer ones so that I didn't have to manage as many tenants. So now I'm down to 16 units, but the same size portfolio, like wealth. Yeah.
Holy shit. You are an
Mhm.
inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's really like, yes, it takes a lot of work, but I think most people spend so much time in college or high school or whatever. And all of those are harder than what I'm teaching people how to do. Like
It's im
this is math, like this is like addition and subtraction and occasionally multiplication, but it's very simple math. And it's mostly just relationships, which women are good at.
it gives the fiery divine female rage, like, right in here, right?
Mhm.
Because things don't have to be as hard as they are.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't. It's just the paradigm that we've been fed. It's this like go to school, go to college, rack up a bunch of debt, go and clock in for somebody at a corporate job for 30 years and then at the end of your life, when you're like sick and frail, that's when you'll retire and we'll take care of you then. That's sort of the prescription that we've been fed as Americans, but watching my dad go through what he did and watching so many other Americans, it's just not panning out. The side effects of that prescription, the American dream, is not really working for us anymore. And so we need to start using unconventional methods to build wealth. And I think this is one of them.
First of all, let me say my sincere condolences
Mm.
for your loss.
Thank you.
Alzheimer's is just
Oh,
such a devastating thing to go through.
mhm.
So, I think what you've done with that pain and that challenge is just absolutely incredible.
Thank you. A leader of, like, taking these really hard moments in life and transmuting them into something that gives life and helps others, and through that process, you heal yourself. Like, for example, my big tragedy was that my parents weren't prepared for retirement. They didn't
Mm,
have wealth. And so I switched gears and I learned how to build wealth, but then I started teaching other people. So every time I help a home buyer close as a realtor or I teach somebody how to build wealth, it's like I get to relive that
mhm.
situation when I was in my 20s with my family, but there's a different ending. And every time I do that, it's this healing cycle of like I couldn't do this for my family, but now I get to do it for somebody else's family and it's so healing.
Oh. And so doing this work, I'm curious to know if you've run into resistance anywhere from.
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, I
Oh
figured,
yeah.
okay. Can we talk
Oh
about
yeah.
that for a bit?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, like, okay, first off, you gotta ask hundreds of people if you can buy their house before they say yes, so get used to rejection,
Mhm,
like, eat it for breakfast,
right.
I used to cold call and I put boxing gloves on because you don't know what people are throwing at you, and I just wanted to airbox being like, "Ouch, that hurt, but that's fine, I'm going." So, yes, tons of that kind of rejection, but, even on the larger scale, like, for instance, I'm a top realtor in Portland as well, and when I first started talking about this, people would just spend, 30, 40 minutes telling me how wrong I was and how nobody would adopt this and it can never happen and whatever, and I would listen to them, I'd hear their objections and whatnot, but I would just say the same thing, "Well, but then how come I did it? If it doesn't work, then how do I exist?"
Yeah.
And I just couldn't argue with that, and I think, when we're close to something, we think we know, right? Realtors think that they know because they do real estate. But really, even though seller financing is on every single real estate form across the entire nation, if you ask a realtor, like 1 out of 20 might have done a seller finance transaction.
Mm,
Most of them are terrified of it. Most of them think it's gonna get them in trouble and they don't wanna touch it. And so when we have realtors who are supposed to be at the front lines of educating the American public about their options when it comes to real estate, being afraid of doing that, well, we have a problem. And so a big part of my mission is to educate realtors. And in Portland, I can say I've definitely started to create this movement of belief and imagination that did not exist before.
so you're basically spearheading a whole movement all by yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really trying to start a movement. I mean, I wrote a book that I'm giving away for free. I did a TED Talk that's reached almost 250,000 people already. Like, my goal is that every person in America know that seller financing exists and that it's accessible to them. And whether or not they're the right person for it, not everybody is, of course. You have to be responsible. You gotta be somebody who pays your bills. I don't want people going out there and saying, "I don't have a credit score, but I can buy a house." Like, no,
Hmm,
you need to have a good reputation first. You need to be a responsible human being, otherwise you're just devastating our neighborhoods with bad agreements.
right.
But if you're a responsible person, if you're hardworking, if you have integrity, if you understand how to budget and how to run a small business like a small rental,
Mhm.
then you're a good candidate. You don't need to have a W-2 job or have a bunch of capital or the things that banks tell us that we need. You just need a relationship with somebody who trusts you, and you need to be trustworthy.
And I'm curious, so you came from obviously a family where wealth was obviously not, that was not
Mhm.
a thing that you knew, right, growing up. So
Yeah,
I can only imagine, especially being a woman in America in a family that's not wealthy,
yeah.
you must have had to overcome so many money blocks. What,
Oh,
like, let's talk about that for a little bit because I know that so many women struggle with that, especially
mm,
oh god, well, just individuals, but especially if you are someone that wants to go into business or if you
yeah,
want to become a sovereign person who doesn't
yeah,
work for anybody. So let's just
yeah.
talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I think this is such an important topic. I had these limiting beliefs too. I'll give you a story that I think you'll really enjoy. I When I was living in Uganda doing humanitarian work in my undergrad, I was living in this little rural village and I was the only white person. In fact, sometimes little kids would see me and they'd never seen a white person before and they'd just run away screaming. They'd be like, a ghost. It's so scary. It's so, I mean, it was very rural. And I was living with a host family there and one of their cousins came to visit and he just ran up to me, hands me this book. He's like, you gotta read this book. And I'm like, what is this? And it said, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mhm.
So for anybody who doesn't know about that's like the cornerstone book for real estate investing in the 90s. It's all the basics, it's super easy to read, and it's what most real estate investors will say turn them on to real estate investing. So I'm picking up this book and I'm in Uganda and I'm thinking, oh, Americans, they're so greedy. They're always trying to build wealth. And I just judged the heck out of this little kid.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want your book. And I just sort of like gave it back to him. And he's like, no, please take it for 2 weeks. I think you'd benefit. And he's like trying to teach me.
The kid in
And
Uganda.
yeah, this like 16-year-old
You
boy,
need rich
like,
dad, poor dad.
yeah, he's like
That's
trying to,
weird.
proselytize me. And I'm like, no, I'm way above that. I was so self-righteous. So you can just imagine who I was in my 20s, right? Living in a slum, doing this work in Uganda. I was a I was even dumpster diving for 70% of my food when I graduated. Like I was as gritty and anti-capitalist as you can get. And then I realized when my dad got sick that this was my own mindset that got us here, like their mindset as well. It was this impoverished mindset. And I think doing international development work and working with people who are even more impoverished and seeing how their minds thought that, money might be bad or whatnot, I realized I was that same person in my own culture, looking at rich people, judging them,
Mhm.
thinking that they're bad. I mean, you can't become what you hate. It's hard to do that. Right? You can't become if you have all these negative beliefs about having money, you will block yourself energetically from ever getting there, and you'll tell yourself stories about like, "Oh, I don't wanna be like them. Like, they're those greedy people, those awful people. They must have done something bad to get that money." So, I think at the beginning of my book, I spend several chapters, like deconstructing these money myths that we have been told in America, especially women, especially people of color who have really been oppressed financially for generation over generation. And a big part of that is we've internalized the narrative of the oppressor as truth for ourselves. And so, the lie that I'm going to become a bad person if I'm more empowered. I mean, that is an insidious lie that, as women, our highest and best purpose is to serve other people. And if we were to make more money, that would make us pretty self-centered or greedy, right? I mean, you look at social media, or not media, social media, but you look at Disney, right? You look at different characters. Cruella de Vil. What is a
Mhm.
woman when she's wealthy? She's evil. She
Mhm.
skins puppies, right? Like
Oh
that's
god,
the
yeah, I
definition of a powerful, wealthy woman in at least when I was growing up.
yeah.
Versus like Batman, Bruce Wayne. He's got like a mansion and he's got
Mhm.
a cool car and he's saving the world because
Yes.
he's wealthy, right? These different images in society of what's acceptable for men and women play out in our own minds as we tell ourselves what's possible and what's not possible and what we're going to become or not become by having more money.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that hits on so many different points. I mean, also just from the self-worthiness aspect,
Mhm.
we're not even always aware, I don't think, of how much self-loathing
Mhm.
creeps into it. And that's also part of patriarchy and
Yeah.
capitalism as well. Like you're not really good enough for
Yeah.
this, that, or the other thing, which prevents
Yeah.
us from taking advantage of opportunities that
Yeah.
might seem super complex and it just feels totally out of reach.
Yeah, it's a lot of what I do with my coaching students. Before we learn about how to structure deals or, buy something with very little money, first we got to do that inner work of that internalized oppression and, the narratives that we replay over and over about who we are. And it's insidious. It's like you start to do a new task, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to learn about real estate. And as soon as you open up that book, you get flooded with all of these thoughts about why you can't do it. You're not good at math or whatever negative things you've ever heard in your life. Those are the oppressive voices. And the problem is we identify with it. We think that it's our voice telling us these things, and then we take that direction. But the reality is it's just our brain trying to protect us, and it's grabbing every bully, every negative Nancy, and just throwing those scripts at you, trying to protect you from what's new. But if you don't do new things, you'll never have new results. And so the key is really having an awareness. Like I said, it's a spiritual journey. It's this awareness of self and who you actually are and these negative voices and how those are not you, and really taking agency and control and like you said, sovereignty in your own life.
Mel, how do you walk your clients through the process of reprogramming those limiting beliefs about money that they have?
Yeah, so I really encourage like a lot of journaling, and one of the tasks that I put them up to is to really take a few days and write down those negative thoughts. And I call it the anti-self. So really
Mm.
get to know your anti-self. Write down the list of 100 things that they say about money and you. And then once you see that list, I recommend taking that list and writing the juxtaposition of it, which is a manifesto. So for instance, like my manifesto, when I first got started, it was along the lines of like, I will get up each day. I will face this. Even though they tell me that I can't do it, I can do it. Like
Mm.
all these negative beliefs, I would just turn to the opposite. Like I am the type of person who does things that other people say is impossible. one of my first, LLCs when I bought that triplex with $500, I called it I Am They LLC because I realized that in my own mind, when I was learning about seller financing, I just kept telling myself that other people do this, that other people could buy without very much money, or other people could meet sellers in our community. And I realized that talking voice in my head was actually preventing me from taking the actions that I needed to get out there and meet the right people. So when I actually did purchase that property, I wanted a reminder to myself that I am those people. I am they.
It's something that doesn't, I don't think it's said quite enough. It's that, like, literally, when you make a different choice,
Mhm.
you, I'm not explaining this correctly. So, the limiting belief, make sure that every decision that you make, every moment that you show up in a day is coming from that place of lack or
Mhm.
scarcity or limiting belief or unworthiness. And that small shift causes, it might not be a lot to look at when you look in the mirror, but it's so monumental.
Yes.
It's so monumental.
Yes.
Like, what is the biggest difference? Like,
Mhm.
if you think about some of the people that you've helped, what's really stood out to you in terms of
Mm.
what you've witnessed?
Yeah, making this big jump for myself and for my coaching students, I think the biggest factor is surrounding yourself with other people who have the same imagination, who are doing the things that you hope to do one day. There's no natural path from social work to real estate mogul,
Yeah.
right? There wasn't like books. Like I wrote the book, but that didn't exist before. And
Right.
so, to do that, I realized from my psychological background, being a therapist, that I needed to surround myself with evidence and modeling the behavior that I wanted to adapt and adopt for my own life. And so I just started going to real estate events. And that also deconstructed my negative beliefs around people who had money because I started meeting really lovely people who were humanitarians and environmentalists, and they were building really beautiful buildings that were providing sustainable housing for our communities. And it started to rework my brain and open up this world of possibility. And that's why I was so successful. When I learned about seller financing, I went to this boot camp and I paid $8,000, and it was a weekend, and they told me a whole bunch of information, and I was like, great. But when I went back to that boot camp to volunteer like 5 years later when I was financially free, I found out that only 10% of the people actually did it. And I was shocked. I was thinking, wow, this changed my whole life. Like, how did this not change your life? And I realized it's because they didn't have community when they left that boot camp, and I did. I created a little small group, and we met every single week, and we talked about our deals, and we encouraged each other, and we did the hard work together. And so that's what I do with my coaching students now too. I put them in a cohort so they can learn together.
So what's next for you then, I guess? Like, it's your,
Mm.
oh my God, it sounds like, so you're a realtor, you're a coach,
Mhm.
you also
Mhm.
teach other realtors. You're building a
Mm.
movement. Like, what, are
Yeah.
you gonna be president next, please?
Yeah. No, 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 no. I mean, really right now, like I'm making this big transition from, running my realtor team for many years and kind of being in that world to really just doing this full time and teaching people how to build wealth through seller financing. And so I'm right at the precipice of that. I actually just ended my team. I'm transferring over my administrative person over to this new company, and I'm like really starting to make that big leap into this new career. And my goal is just to build out this academy and teach as many people as I can how to build wealth sustainably and ethically in their communities.
I'm always really curious when I'm talking to very conscious minded business owners, people that are humanitarians, what it's like right now to kind of do what you're doing amidst the
Mhm.
backdrop of what is a
Mhm.
very tumultuous time for
Yeah.
Americans.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. Gosh, I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed, but I'm up to recently, like I'm a pretty low news consumer. Like I'm one of I sort of take this Buddhist mindset of if you can't actually influence it, it's better for you not to know about it because it's just a drain on your resources so that you have less compassion to give in the people that you actually interact with. So I'm a low news consumer, but obviously it is hard to avoid the news these days. And this year has been unprecedented in so many ways. And so for me, it's my motivation. Like, when I hear the really negative things that are happening, it is the reason that I get onto TikTok and Instagram and I do my thing, and to me, this is the most practical response to what's happening in our current administration. And I'll give you an example of, like, how practical it is. Last month, I closed two properties with clients who were moving up from Texas or from other places that they were not allowed to be trans in anymore. They could not get the services they needed. It was a scary situation, Texas, that sort of thing. And so my work was helping them to relocate, but also to buy an asset so they could support their family with, single mom who has a trans kid, for instance. And so I find it highly applicable to as a response to the world affairs. And my hope is that this is a way to combat the billionaire class that is running our country right now. The more that we collectively work together and rebuild the social fabric of our communities, the less that they can take advantage of us through these corporate and bank financing methods.
What kind of
Yeah.
you probably have had people obviously tell you how grateful they are for you, but I want to give you the floor to kind of talk about maybe some of the other results that you've maybe provided for people.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. So I had a student named Sorsha that came to me last August, and her husband had been laid off from his, tech job, and they were starting this brand new little property management company trying to do what's called midterm rentals, which is when you like rent month to month to like travel nurses or people whose houses have burned down. So it's not Airbnb, it's a longer term thing. And anyway, so she came to me because I'm known as the person who helps you buy property with no money. And
Nice.
she's like, hey, I really want to get into real estate. I'm managing these units, but I don't really know what to do. And I said, well, what do you have? She said, well, I have a single family house and I have a little Airbnb and it's making about $1,500 a month. I said, great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to take that $1,500 a month of revenue and you're going to give that revenue to people in your community, your friends, your family, whatnot. And that's going to help you to raise money for your down payments. Okay. So she went out and she used that to get $40,000. And then what she did is she went out to these condo owners. We have a ton of condo owners who can't sell right now, can't really rent. The market is just totally saturated and it's tough to be a condo owner in our market. So she met with them. And what I teach my students is when you solve problems, and I mean real people's problems, like I have two mortgages and I can't pay for it, or if I start to rent this, I can't manage it, or I'm underwater so I can't sell it, right? Those are real problems.
Mhm.
When you solve those problems, then the money always follows. So I teach my students to solve problems first. So she went and met with these condo owners and she said, well, what if I rented your property? I'm a property manager. You wouldn't have to deal with it. I'll rent it from you. And that's all you'd have to deal with. They're like, yeah, that'd be great. So she gave him $2,000 for the deposit. She put about 5,000 into it in furniture. And she took what was going to be rented long term at $2,000 a month and started renting it around 3 or 3,500 a month. And she did that 6 times. So she basically, in 6 months, she got 6 of these, what they're called lease options, which is a lease with the option to purchase later. And she got 6 of them. So $40,000 turned into $45,000 of passive annual income by solving other people's problems, right? They didn't know what to do with their condos, but she did. Yeah, it transforms lives. She's now the third largest property manager of midterm rentals in our city right now because she's just exploded after that. So it's a powerful tool to learn how to use finance, whether it's seller financing or a variety of other creative financing that I teach.
Oh my gosh. It's happening in Canada too, where the markets they're saturated and nothing's moving. And so you get
Yeah.
like these offers, right, with tons of subject to sale being one
Yeah.
of them. And it creates this like domino effect. And
Yeah.
so what you're saying is that someone who can't get rid of their house could
Mhm.
potentially entertain a seller financing option
Mhm.
as the seller looking
Oh,
for a buyer.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if people aren't able to move their homes, this is the cool thing. Like when I'm making an offer on a seller financed home, it's usually above asking. I'm usually trying to pay them more than what they want
Mm,
because in return, I'm going to ask for a low down payment and a low interest rate. Those are my wins. Their
mhm,
wins, I want to make sure they get as much money as they want. And the reason I'm willing to do that is because if I have a low interest rate, it's going to cash flow, which is the most important part. I got to make sure that it pays for itself, right?
mm.
And if it's got a low down payment, then I'm not having to come out of very much money out of my own pocket. So I can keep doing more of them. So that's how I designed this win-win with them. And they're winning because they're getting that money. They don't have to be a landlord anymore. They don't have to own the property anymore. They just turn into a passive lender. So they get mailbox money, no more tenants, no more toilets. And so it's like it's just a beautiful arrangement of kind of the cycle of, you like think about like composting. This is kind of odd, but like think about composting, right? Like when you take those food scraps and you like put them back in your garden and then it replenishes the soil and then new things spring up, right? If we did that economically, It would look like one landlord getting tired and done and handing off the baton to another person who then fuels them. It's like this cycle, this regenerative cycle where now that landlord is the lender and they're sitting on the sidelines. They're collecting the benefits of all their hard work. And a new person is springing up and able to use that property to create wealth for themselves. And so it creates a sustainable loop of wealth between us.
That could truly disrupt the utter like, the self-licking ice cream cone of just the
Mm.
the housing market
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
everywhere.
like you think about it, it's like, okay, I like this analogy too. Okay, when you buy a house, think about it like you're planting a seed, right? And every month you have your little watering can, you're paying the mortgage, you're
Mhm,
watering it, right? And it starts to grow, and that's your equity. So over time, you own more and more of the house, which is awesome. And if it's a rental property, it produces fruit, and you can eat that fruit. It's sustainable, right?
mhm,
Eventually, people get tired. They don't want to own the house or the rental or whatever. And so, what we've been doing historically is we just cut the tree down. We cut the tree down, and what are you left with? Well, you lose the stump. The seller doesn't get to keep that, right? That's the
mhm,
cost of sale. That's your realtor fees and the buyer's repairs and all that stuff. And they have to pay taxes, which is all the like, think of the leaves and the branches, all that's gone too. And of course, there's no fruit. There's no more cash flow. But
mhm,
what all the seller that they walk away with is just the trunk. All they got. And so they can burn it, they can use it, they can sell it, whatever, but they can't continue to grow wealth.
mhm,
But when we do seller financing, it's like taking that watering can and just handing it to the buyer. And they continue to grow the same tree. And then that tree not only produces fruit for the seller, it over time starts to produce fruit for the buyer too. And if we just started to run our neighborhoods the way that we should be running our forests, then we'd have a much more, sustainable and thriving community. What we've been doing is chopping down all these trees, and then we're like, gosh, I don't know why we don't have any wealth in our communities. Well, I don't know. Look at where your money's going every month. Thousands of dollars is going to bank interest. And then when you go sell your home, you have to pay taxes and all that interest goes to them. It's like, it's very extractive.
Oh my god, no. Yeah, you just blew my mind again. Yeah, that is totally by design. Of course, the banks
Yes.
would swoop in and create a system with
Yes.
compound interest. So
Yes. 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 And look at an amortization schedule, right? If you've ever seen one, like pull it up on the internet if you haven't. But an amortization schedule, you look at the first 5 years, it's almost all interest. It's almost all interest. So you're basically paying rent to live there, right? Of course, you get appreciation. That's awesome. But when you look at like an interest only loan, it gets cut down by a third because you're not having this amortization calculator. And that means that the buyer gets to keep that third in their own pocket. So
mm,
they can use that for diapers or groceries or to buy the next property, whatever. But doing an interest only payment, a bank's not going to do that because they don't get to do that amortization schedule and really front load all the interest at the beginning because
mhm.
they know that the average, at least American, is going to sell their house in the first 5 years. So they basically just made all the interest up front and you didn't really pay much of the principal.
So what happens then if you have a mortgage, right? And you're like, maybe I'll try seller financing. What happens to that mortgage?
Oh, this is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked this. So, most mortgages have what's called a due on sales clause, which means if you transfer ownership, if you were to do seller financing and not pay them off, they would ask for the note to be due in 30 days. In other words, you owe us hundreds of thousands of dollars in 30 days because you went behind our back and you sold this property without us knowing. Okay, that's what's in most mortgages.
Mhm.
Now, to deal with that, there's like 8 different ways that I teach, but I'm just going to give you the one that's the easiest. Okay. To deal with that, all you need to do is get a bank loan for the same size of the bank loan that you're going to be selling. So, for instance, if you owe 500,000 on your underlying mortgage, your new buyer will get a mortgage for 500,000 and then you can seller finance the rest. And that's how you turn your equity into an income stream.
How can someone, like the average person listening to this now, how can just someone start seller financing? What regardless of the side of the fence that they're on?
Yeah. Yeah. So, my book I've given away for free. You can just Google Bank on Your Neighbor. It's on every major podcast because I know most people listen to books these days and don't read them. I'm the same way. If you want to buy it, it's on Amazon, but let's not give Amazon any more money.
Yes.
Um, so
Mhm.
anyways, my recommendation is start there. I really walk people through the process, not only the deconstructing and deconditioning of the money myths that we have in our lives and kind of that inner spiritual work, but I also give you all the tools you need to be able to find sellers in your community, how to talk to them, how to build a win-win transaction, and then how to scale your portfolio using other people's money, which is what I did too.
I have to ask, what is your definition of personal sovereignty?
Ooh, that is such a good question. Ooh, I think personal sovereignty starts with awareness of your own limitations and how within yourself you're limiting yourself from having the life that you want. And I'll give you an example. I'm a very financially successful person, but sometimes I still work a lot even though I don't need to.
Mm.
And that's because of my own difficulties with sovereignty and my own programming that tells me I need to work, work, work in order to have. When in reality, that's just my own limiting beliefs. So for me right now, sovereignty is not only calculating my goals on my reach and how many people I can help and, how much money I make each month, but more importantly, how much time am I doing all of those things? And am I giving enough time and sovereignty to my own schedule? So I think sovereignty is really that personal agency and being able to make choices with awareness.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, and is there anything else that you'd like to leave listeners with?
Yeah, I'd love to share this story. Have you ever heard of Muhammad Yunus?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so and I don't expect you to. Most people don't. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, but I'd love to just leave your audience with this beautiful story that really informs the work that I'm doing, and you'll see. So
Okay.
when I was living in India, I spent a few months in Bangladesh just learning the language because I was speaking it fluently. And while I was there, I learned about this guy named Muhammad Yunus, who was a professor at the School of Bangladesh in 1976. And you can imagine him being in his college classroom teaching supply and demand when just outside the university gates, people were starving because it's a third world country. And one day he decided he wanted to do something about it. So he went to a local village named Jorba and he met with this woman who was making bamboo stools and he asked her how much money she made. And she told him only a few cents. And he was shocked. He asked why. It wasn't because she didn't have a lot of skill. It wasn't because she wasn't trying very hard. It was because she couldn't afford the $5 a day it would cost to buy bamboo in bulk. And so instead, what she did is she reached out to a loan shark and she was charged exorbitant interest and it meant that it ate up all of her profits and only left her in poverty. And so after he learned this, he went all around the village and he asked all the women, and do you know what it would cost to liberate 42 women in a slum in Bangladesh? Just guess.
Oh my god, I don't even know where to start.
It was only $27.
Oh my
$27.
god.
So he decided, okay, right then and there, he was going to do something about it. And so he reached in his wallet and he gathered all the women and he said, I'm going to teach you financial literacy and I'm going to give you this $27 and I want you to lend it to one another in small groups and give each other some accountability and support. And I'm going to teach you financial literacy and you'll meet week after week. And slowly by slowly, each woman built her business and paid the group back. And what was remarkable is every single penny was paid back. And when he realized that, I mean, as an economics professor, he's like, wait a second. Even the general public doesn't pay back every single penny, right? There's defaults, but this group did. So he realized he had really cracked the code on how to help impoverished women. And so what he did is he started what's called the Grameen Bank, which has lent billions of dollars to millions of women all around the world and has really helped alleviate poverty in third world nations for many small business owners who are women. And what I found so remarkable about that story is it really was just about financial literacy and personal accountability, which is what seller financing is too. It's teaching somebody how to actually write a mortgage document, one that works really for both parties, and then having a person on the other side of that transaction that you deeply care about and you want to make sure that they do well and that they want you to do well too. And I'll leave you with this, but one of my favorite quotes from him is that the poor are not a financial risk. They're a financial revolution just waiting to happen if only someone would trust them first. And I get a little teary eyed, but that's how I feel about Americans. So many of us are locked out of the banking system because Gen Z graduates with $100,000 of student debt these days. And most people don't have, the income to afford houses at the prices and the interest rates that they are. We're locked out of bank financing largely. And what I believe is that we're not a financial risk, despite the fact that the financial system doesn't want us in. I think that we're a financial revolution if only we can find sellers who will trust us first. And that's the message I bring to people.
I damn it, Mel. Now I want to go other places with questions.
That's fine. I have time.
It's funny. I literally I had that thought today, just like the Elon Musks of the world and
Mm,
that kind of thing. Like when
yeah.
you talk about the wealth disparity, I don't think people realize just how much money is $1 trillion,
Yeah.
$1 billion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it is so vast
Yeah.
and it's only getting worse, I think.
Yeah.
Can you
I
say
agree.
that in the States?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is getting worse. Yeah.
Okay. And so, what for women especially, like who are again wanting to build wealth, just or not even just build wealth, but like
Mm.
go into business, work for themselves,
Yeah.
no matter
Yeah.
what, right? Like what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think the hardest part about venturing into either financial literacy or building your own business, the hardest part is betting on yourself, is believing in yourself, is saying, I know I don't know how to do this, but I can learn how. And I think that change in energy, we'll call it, that change and that shift in identity as somebody who doesn't need to know it all first. And I think as women, we're really conditioned to like be very perfect and like put it together, right? And so taking the risk of failing or not doing it perfectly the first time really holds us back. But if we can break out of that conditioning and sort of become children again, right? When you teach a child how to ride a bike, they're not like, I don't want anybody to see me. They don't care. They're just like jumping on, like, oh, I didn't quite get it and I fell over and I skinned my knee and whatever. Like, they're not concerned about their public persona, they're concerned about learning the new task, and so I would encourage you to tap into that inner child and let go of the social critiques that your mind is gonna play on repeat and discouraging you to take any new actions that are actually gonna change your life, and sink into that childlike behavior that says, "I'm curious and I wanna try. There's nothing to lose. If I fail, I'll learn from this. If I mess up, I'll get back up." Like, just that very childlike curiosity and imagination for what's possible when you're not too afraid to try.
Thank you so much for that. Can you talk to me a little bit about the personal transformation that you experienced when you chose to do something different?
Yeah, I came from a Christian conservative environment, and my parents loved me, but they were very anti-gay and certainly didn't have any words like trans in their vocabulary. And so I really grew up in an environment where I didn't belong. And
Mhm.
I think for me and for many people, when we grow up in a space where we're not accepted and we're fearful of being our authentic self, we play it small. We become very oppressed and fearful, and we seek belonging over everything else. And I think what helped me transform is when I came back from India, I discovered that I was gay.
Mhm.
And it was this moment of, "Oh my gosh, that's not how I planned my life. I was supposed to be this Christian missionary, and here I am, very much, falling from, grace," you know? And so I was confronted with, do I wanna be my authentic self, or do I wanna continue to conform to be what other people expect of me? And I think at that moment, there was this breaking open of, if I am going to live, I wanna be me. And I think the queer transformation was the predecessor of my financial transformation, because once I was letting go of what other people thought about me for being queer, I didn't care what they thought about me for pursuing wealth either. In fact, it's kind of funny in Portland, Oregon, when I come out as queer or trans, people don't care. But when I say that I'm a landlord, it's like, ah, like, they don't get mad. People are like, okay, how could you be? There's all these assumptions. And so I have to come out as a landlord more often than not. But I don't care because they don't know, right? We fear what we don't know, and when people project their money problems onto me, same thing. When people think that I'm awful for being queer, it's the same thing. I know it's a story that they've written about themselves that they're trying to tell me because they're afraid to go there. And I think as long as we recognize that we need to be first true to ourselves, our authentic selves, and to choose ourself, because choosing myself did mean financial empowerment. It did change my life to invest in things, including my own education and how to think and all that. But choosing myself, it's not selfish. You're the only person who can do that job. Nobody else is going to choose you. Like, you're the only person who can do it. And so, yeah, I would just encourage your listeners to really see financial literacy as self care and self love, and
Mhm.
not. It does not have to be this capitalistic, oppressive win-lose equation, because there are ways to build wealth that are win-win and are generative.
I honestly can't thank you enough. This has been such an inspired journey and conversation. I think you're just such an amazing soul, and
Oh,
I
thank you.
just love seeing you when you pop up in my feed, and I think that other people, well, hell, you're doing really well on Instagram, aren't you?
I just started this summer, and I've got over 100,000 followers between the 2. Yeah, the message is resonating, as you can tell.
You must be so proud of you.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea. It's just such an honor to be able to share this with your audience and for the folks who are really looking for this kind of solution. Like, I just so appreciate the amplification that you've helped me do.
Thank you so much for being here. And I wish you nothing but success in building your movement. And I can't wait to learn more and just keep following you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chelsea. This has been an amazing hour together. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for being here. If something stirred within you today, that's not an accident. It's a shift. To go deeper, visit thesovereignshift.ca, where you'll find breathwork audios, resources, mini courses, workshops, and programs to support your reclamation, body, mind, and soul. Like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, your breath is your power. Your truth is your compass. Your sovereignty is the revolution. Until next time, stay sovereign.